Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're taking a first look at a brand new Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Orthworm. Orthworm is a bulky Steel-type Pokemon with the moveset of Mud Slap, Rock Tomb, and Earthquake. So its moveset is pretty solid, even though none of its moves do get same type attack bonus. Orthworm can be encountered in Tier 3 raids as a part of the Steel Resolve event. Now, Orthworm, not the greatest Pokemon for the Great League, but it's the new rank 8 Pokemon in the Fantasy Cup, which returns later today. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a first look at Orthworm in action in some Fantasy Cup practice battles. Hopping into the first match, picking up a terrible lead, Shadow Flygon into Shadow Hydreigon. I save switch into Orthworm, my opponent responds with a Shadow Empoleon, and so far Orthworm is core breaking my opponent's team. I will put up the shield as they go for the Hydro Cannon, farm up, and then fire off Rock Tomb. If they end up no shield in the Rock Tomb, this should allow me to go for a farm down, but they end up putting up the shield. This is probably an even better outcome, as now that the Shadow Empoleon is debuffed, Hydro Cannon is going to do even less. Now my Orthworm isn't the greatest IVs, I did get it from a remote raid, but even with the remote raid pretty poor IVs, you can see this Pokemon does have some pretty solid bulk to it. In comes Shadow Hydreigon, they put up the shield as I go for the Rock Tomb. Hydreigon gets the full farm down, as unfortunately I fall just short of Rock Tomb number 2. In the back is Shadow Magnezone, and we see why my opponent had to send Empoleon into Orthworm. They were just completely core broken. That's one thing that I think is really powerful about Orthworm in the Fantasy Cup, is Dragon plus Steel pairings are just completely core broken to smithereens unless it's a Pokemon like Flygon that can actually hit back for super effective damage. In comes Hydreigon, winning charge attack priority, but I still have a shield to hide behind. Twister KOs Shadow Hydreigon, and that's a game 1 win. Picking up a decent lead in game number 2, Shadow Flygon into Shadow Waterfall Empoleon. These waterfalls are doing way more damage than I would ever like them to, but I'm going to stay in and fire off the Sand Tomb. Empoleon puts up the shield, and here, arguably, I think I make a misplay. What I should have done is just no shield to Flygon, and then Mud Slap down the debuffed Empoleon with Orthworm. Then I would have had Orthworm up a shield and up energy, and Orthworm would have been an absolute nightmare. But instead, my opponent ends up no shielding and gets a big energy head start on Shadow Giratina. If this Shadow Giratina has Ancient Power, I could be in a lot of trouble. Ancient Power hits very hard. I no shield, it is Ancient Power, and that's going to be a bit of a problem. I farm up to the Dazzling Gleam. I'm going to be full sending here, wanting the shield or the knockout. My opponent is going to give up the shield. I try for a catch. I don't get the catch, but my opponent stays in to throw energy. With Ancient Power and Dragon Claw, they should be walled, but they're actually Ancient Power Shadow Sneak, and that does some pretty massive damage. In the back is Turtonator looking for a farm down, but Orthworm is going to make it to the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb and Mud Slaps nearly pick up the one-hit knockout onto the Turtonator, and now I get to send in Togetic. I am going to respect the overheat here. Turtonator full sends, and that is a massive shield. Now I can farm down, exit with the Dazzling Gleam loaded, and this will easily be enough to KO that Shadow Giratina. I definitely misplayed by not going for Orthworm farm, as Orthworm up a shield and up energy would have devastated that team, but the good news is we're still able to get the win. We move to game number 3 as I pick up a pretty decent lead, Shadow Flygon into Empoleon. This is the non-Shadow Empoleon, which means it's typically going to be on Metal Sound. Metal Sound does have slightly faster pacing than Waterfall, but of course doesn't have nearly the same fast move pressure. I farm up, baiting the Scorching Sands, able to get a shield off my opponent, and here I'm just going to fire off the Sand Tomb on charge attack priority. This way, if my opponent wants my final shield, they're going to have to give me their final shield first. I decide that I'm pretty comfortable just taking this to the zeros, so I'm going to shield up, go for the farm down, but they pivot out and send in Tinkaton. Now Tinkaton, I don't have an amazing answer to in the back. I could send in Orthworm, but Bulldoze will hit for super effective, so I decided to just stay in with the Flygon and get as much sand attack damage as possible. Now I can send in Orthworm. Orthworm will be able to absorb the Bulldozes, and I'll have an Orthworm up energy for the endgame. Bulldoze really does not do much, but unfortunately my opponent does get the Bulldoze debuff. That means the second Bulldoze hits way harder. I send in the Togetic, and in the back is Shadow Giratina. With all shields used earlier in the game, there's nowhere for Giratina to hide. Dazzling Gleam rocks the Giratina. Shadow Giratina somehow survives the super effective hit to return fire with the Ancient Power, but unfortunately, it's just too little too late. The Empoleon is going to be switch locked. It's not going to be able to pivot out to go for a catch, and it is definitely in Heat Wave range. So in comes the Empoleon. I fire off the Heat Wave right away. All I have to do is just ensure that I can outpace. Heat Wave will take the knockout. I pivot back into Orthworm, snipe down Tinkaton, and take the win. We pick up a bit of a scary lead in the next match, Flygon into Alolan Sandslash. Thank goodness the Sandslash is not on Powder Snow. This team would be way too weak to a Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash. Honestly, I wasn't really considering that when team building, and that could have been a very big problem. My opponent ends up no shielding. They save switch into Giratina, and I'm not going to bait. I'm instead just going to be full sending the Twister. Twister does get shielded. My opponent should throw 4 and the Ominous Wind, so I'm going to go for the catch and sneak onto Togetic. Ominous Wind, really not going to do much here, but my opponent covers for the catch. They went for the Shadow Ball. What a read from my opponent, and that immediately puts me on the defensive. I put up the shield as they try and go for the cap tie. I'm going to throw 2 in the move here to ensure that I can outpace the Sand Slash, and my opponent catches the Dazzling Gleam onto the Sand Slash. That is absolutely devastating. What a catch from my opponent. My opponent, however, will now be switch locked, and that could be to my advantage. Back in comes the Giratina. I go for the Heat Wave. I'm not expecting Heat Wave to take the knockout here, but it would be nice. Heat Wave lands. Giratina survives. 1 HP remaining. Giratina will take the knockout with the Ominous Wind, and I can bring in Orthworm. Orthworm gets the snipe down. In the back is Azumarill. Azumarill is up a shield, but I have an Orthworm, and they have no ability to reset debuffs. So I'm just going to fire off the Rock Tomb as soon as I get it. Azumarils in this meta will typically be on Hydro Pump. Nice turn wait from my opponent. They're not going to let me go for a catch onto Flygon. Hydro Pump lands, but Orthworm does survive. I'm going to farm up, building up to the Earthquake, and now I will go for the Rock Tomb bait. Earthquake would inflict some pretty massive damage, so the shield does come up. I'm going to farm up energy, trying to make it to the Rock Tomb, but my opponent's not going to let me get there. I am, however, trusting in the fact that I have quite a lot of energy on the Flygon. So I send in the Flygon, fire off the Sand Tomb, and now it's going to be a race. I just need to make it to Sand Tomb number 2. Azumarill is very low. Flygon just can't get there. We're 1 or 2 sand attacks away. So close to pulling off the win, but unfortunately, Azumarill's too bulky, and it's not to be. We get a great lead in the next match. Shadow Flygon in a Turtonator. My opponent save switches into a Shadow Dragonite, and that is an incredibly cool pick. I respond with Togetic, but Togetic is still going to take insane damage from that Thunder Punch. With Dragonite taking so much damage from Fairy Winds, I'm hoping I can get away with going for a Heat Wave, and it looks like my opponent thinks that I can, as they will put up a shield. This is my only fast move pressure into Dragonite, so I'm going to be shielding back, and then I decide to go for an Undercharge on the Heat Wave. I would love to leave them in 1 Fairy Wind range so I can get a little bit of extra residual energy, but my opponent pivots out, they send in the Turtonator, and I can immediately answer with the Flygon. No baits here, I'm going straight for the Twister. Twister connects, and down goes Turtonator. In the back is Aegislash. My opponent could not afford to send in the Dragonite. The Dragonite would have just gotten Sand Attack down, so they're forced to bring in Aegislash, but Aegislash is paying a very heavy price. Aegislash will fire off energy. I'm more than okay with just fully sacrificing the Flygon, because this is the Orthworm show. Aegislash moves over to Blade form, takes the knockout, in comes Orthworm, answered with the Dragonite. Dragonite able to make a last-second charge stack, and I will respect the superpower. Now, being shields down against an Aegislash is normally a losing spot to be in, but Orthworm is bulky, and I have the power of Rock Tomb on my side. So, now I can artificially increase Orthworm's bulk by debuffing the Aegislash. So even when Aegislash fires off the Shadow Ball, I'm pretty confident. Even my bad Raid IV Orthworm should be able to hang on. Aegislash switches over to Blade form, fires off the Shadow Ball, Orthworm survives, gets the Mud Slap down, and that is a good game. We pick up a terrible lead in the next match, Shadow Flygon into Clefable. I safe switch into Orthworm, my opponent responds with a Turtonator, but this is honestly not much of a response to Orthworm. I'm hoping if the Turtonator tries to commit to the farm down that I can actually make a second Rock Tomb. That would be very nice. And it looks like Orthworm is going to make another Rock Tomb, and that forces energy out of the Turtonator. I'm very okay with just letting the Turtonator knock me out. The Turtonator reveals Brutal Swing. Now typically, you're not going to run a Turtonator without running Dragon Claw. So I'm confident this is Brutal Swing Overheat. So I'm just going to bring in Flygon and click no shield. That's going to be an Overheat. I try for the Sand Attack down, but I can't get it. Turtonator too bulky. They survive on 1 HP to make the last second Brutal Swing. Back in comes Clefable. I fire off the Sand Tomb just to try and get whatever damage that I can get. And I need Togetic to win this game. I send in Togetic, they send in Giratina, and this game might actually be winnable. I'm going to need a massive amount of energy on Togetic, so I'm going to be no shielding as they go for the Shadow Sneak, because I know that a Meteor Mash would do more, and farm up just shy of 100 energy. Dazzling Gleam will take the knockout, my opponent will put up the shield, and they're just trying to get as much fast move pressure as they possibly can. This is going to be a very close game. Can they Fairy Wind down before I can make the Dazzling Gleam? It's going to be close. I'm very low, but Togetic is very, very bulky. Togetic hangs on, very low HP remaining. We make the Dazzling Gleam, knocking out Clefable, and we barely escape with a win. Unfortunately, we get back-to-back fairy leads in the next match, as I end up leading Shadow Flygon into Morgrem. Now, Morgrem is pretty spammy, able to get to foul play very, very quickly. I will put up the shield, and I want to build up and threaten a potential Scorching Sands. Now, I'm not running Scorching Sands, but if my opponent respects it and puts up a shield, that could be a potential win con. Unfortunately, they do not fall for it. I farm up energy, switch into the Togetic, and I'm able to get a catch as Morgrem goes for foul play number 2. Foul play, really not going to do a whole lot here. My opponent sends in Aegislash. This is not a fun spot to be as the Togetic user. I'm able to launch a bunch of Heat Waves, but unfortunately, Heat Wave misses a 3-hit KO onto Aegislash. Aegislash is just so insanely bulky, and I'm already down a shield from shielding up a foul play on Flygon. If possible, I would love to try and land this Heat Wave and then snipe them with a Sand Tomb that's on the Flygon. Heat Wave is going to land, but it's a charge attack priority tie. My counts are right though. My opponent does not have the back-to-back. They're one off, and I should be able to knock them out with a Mud Slap on Orthworm. Aegislash takes the KO, in comes Orthworm, they pivot into Morgrem, and they reset the debuff. That is a little bit unfortunate. Back in comes Aegislash. I'm forced to put up the final shield. I'll finally get the knockout on Aegislash, but I'm down 2 shields to 0. In the back is Shadow Giratina, and this is going to be a very tough game to win. Orthworm firing off Rock Tombs. I'm going to try and go for the CMP Sack swap. I farm up, switch into the Flygon. Did I get the CMP Sack swap? I need it to have a chance to win this game. The Sand Tomb is shielded, but I did not get the CMP Sack swap. That is very unfortunate. In comes Orthworm. I'm going to take some pretty substantial damage from Shadow Sneak. But wait, my opponent doesn't have it. They went for the Ancient Power. They're fishing for a boost. They're on Dragon Claw Ancient Power. I Rock Tomb. I put them at -2. Can Orthworm pull off the win here? This is going to be close. Dragon Claw is going to land. Orthworm looking for the farm down, but they make the last second charge attack. They barely get there. Ancient Power knocks out the Orthworm, and unfortunately, we lose a heartbreaking game. We pick up a terrible lead in the next match. Flygon into Sandslash, and this Sandslash is actually on Powder Snow. I was not thinking about Powder Snow, Alolan Sandslash when building this team, and unfortunately, I probably already lost this game. Orthworm is my only counter to a Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash, so unless I'm able to get a big energy head start on Togetic or get shield advantage, I really don't see how I'm going to be able to win this game. I'm really hoping my opponent decides to put up a shield here because a shield advantage could be nice, but they do not, and instead, they reveal they have a Azumarill. At this point, I just can't win this game. I pivot back into the Flygon just to try and make a move as they send in the Sandslash. The Sandslash will shield up and fully farm down. Sandslash is going to make 3 Ice Punches before I'm able to make a move on the Togetic. So at this point, I'm just not going to waste anyone's time. I'm just going to be no shielding and letting Ice Punch knock me out because I can't beat the Sandslash, and even if I could, there's still a full health Azumarill in the back. There was just not really any play in this game, so may as well not waste anyone's time and just let the Sandslash knock me out. We move to the next match, picking up a bit of a scary lead, Shadow Flygon into Lucario. Even though I'm hitting for super effective and they're only hitting for neutral, Force Palm is just absolutely absurd. Sand Tomb gets the shield, and it looks like gets a break point as well, as suddenly these sand attacks are shredding through Lucario. Lucario goes for the Aura Sphere, I get the sand attack down, and I exit with a charge attack loaded. I'm just looking at the top right to see what comes in. I tried to click the Sand Tomb, but I guess I clicked it too late, and unfortunately, I lose that charge attack. That is really not a good spot to be in, as that Sand Tomb would have been very helpful for Mud Slapping down. Now, I'm in a spot where I'm at an energy disadvantage, and they're getting Bulldoze debuffs on Tinkaton. Now that I'm debuffed, this Bulldoze will do quite a lot of damage. They get a second Bulldoze debuff, and today was just the day where every Bulldoze from Tinkaton debuffed me. Earthquake takes the knockout. In the back is Klefki, and thankfully we are going to win this game. Even if my opponent foul play baits me, Flash Cannon is just such an expensive move to get to that I should be in a very good spot. They do farm up to a potential Flash Cannon. I'm always going to be respecting it because I think my only lose con is if I let it land. This Klefki is actually on Play Rough, so they're not even on Flash Cannon, but I've done enough damage that I could probably even Mud Slap down with the Orthworm and take the win, so Heat Wave will be shielded, but there's more where that came from. The speed of Togetic is just absolutely absurd. Togetic knocks out the Klefki, and we get the win. We move to the final match, and what is this? I lead Shadow Flygon into Shadow Alolan Sandshrew. A safe switch into Orthworm answered with Togekiss, and oh my goodness, we are off to a terrible start. Now, Orthworm does have access to Rock Tomb, which does hit for super effective into the Togekiss, but this is still not a great matchup, because Togekiss has a massive pacing advantage, and Aura Sphere will be able to pick up the 2-hit KO. I'm going to try and make it to another Rock Tomb, but my opponent is going to cut me short, and Aura Sphere will take the knockout. If I have any chance of winning this game, I'm going to need insanely precise energy management on Togetic. So I send in Togetic, and I know that their Psyshock is debuffed, so I am going to be no shielding and just continuing to farm. My opponent pivots into a Azumarill, and wait, there might actually be a chance to win this game. I pivot into the Flygon. This is the only use of Flygon I'm ever going to get in this game. I just fire off the Sand Tomb, get a debuff. My opponent will not let me make it to a second Sand Tomb, and I just have to fully sacrifice the Flygon. If there's a chance, I'm going to need Togetic to 1v3. I farm up just shy of 100 energy, go for the Dazzling Gleam. As it was too bulky, it's not going to take the knockout, but at this point, I put the Azumarill into range where I could farm them down. Despite how bad the alignment's been in this game, I think I actually see a win con, and the win con is this. I need to Heat Wave and then Fairy Wind down the Kiss. If I can get this farm down, I'll exit with the back-to-back Heat Waves that I need to knock out the Sandshrew, and then the Azumarill is basically in one Fairy Wind range. It all comes down to this. Come on, Togetic. We don't get the farm down. Togekiss hangs on, 1 HP remaining. Psyshock knocks out the Togetic, and unfortunately, we lose a heartbreaker of a game. And now some final thoughts on Orthworm and its place in the Fantasy Cup meta. I honestly think that Orthworm is a very strong Pokemon in the Fantasy Cup meta. For the Open Great League, it's obviously going to be a lot less strong because you're going to run into Pokemon that actually have stat products and movesets that have same type attack bonus. So in the Open Great League, it's not going to have nearly as much play, but in a limited format like the Fantasy Cup where the power level is a lot lower, I think Orthworm actually has a massive amount of play. Now, Orthworm will be stronger the better IVs that you have on it. Anytime you have these Pokemon that kind of slow the game down with debuffs and really try and just outlast people, the more bulk you can have on Orthworm, the better. So if it's possible to get one from a raid and then end up trading it to try for better PvP IVs, I think that would end up being preferred. I do think that Orthworm is a very, very strong pick. I honestly don't believe that the team that I built today well supported it whatsoever. There was some very obvious weaknesses to the team, like I was very, very weak to Togekiss with the team. I was very weak to Powder Snow, Alolan Sandslash, or in that final game, the Shadow Alolan Sandshrew. So this team, I don't think I'm the biggest believer of. I did overall go positive with it, but I do believe that Orthworm is a very strong pick. In a meta filled with Pokemon that are exclusively Dragon, Fairy, and Steel, being a Steel type, so you have resistances to Dragon and Fairy, and then having Mud Slaps, you can hit super effective into opposing Steels, I think it puts Orthworm in a really nice spot. I do think that Orthworm is probably best played with Shield in the first incoming charge stack, Rock Tombing, and then just kind of artificially increasing your bulk so you can kind of just tank hits and just be as much of a nuisance as humanly possible. But I actually think that I'm a believer of Orthworm. I think that I was really not looking forward to the second week of Fantasy, but the fact that we have a new Pokemon coming in that could potentially shake up the meta a little bit does give me a little bit of extra excitement to see the Fantasy Cup meta for a second time in just a few short weeks. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.